Rain hammered the cracked pavement outside the county courthouse like a relentless drumbeat, turning the world into a blurred watercolor of grays and shadows. Umbrellas bobbed like black sails in a storm-tossed sea, and the air hung heavy with the scent of wet asphalt and distant thunder. Derek Cole Jensen, 45, and built like the rusted frame of an old Harley, leaned against his bike under the overhang of a sagging oak tree. His leather jacket, scarred from years of road dust and forgotten brawls, clung to his broad shoulders. He wasn't here for the trial inside. No, he'd sworn off that circus years ago. Just passing through on his way to the next nowhere town, or so he told himself. But the rain had other plans, trapping him in this ghost of a place where memories clawed their way back, uninvited. A small figure broke from the crowd, her pink raincoat sodden and flapping like a wounded bird's wing. Naomi Wells, 7 years old, her dark curls plastered to her forehead, clutched a crumpled drawing in her fist. She was supposed to be with her aunt, waiting out the recess in the dry lobby, but some pull deeper than fear, drew her out into the downpour. Her eyes, wide and unblinking despite the sting of rain, scanned the faces until they locked on him. Derek, the man who'd vanished like smoke after that night 2 years back. She pointed a trembling finger, her voice cutting through the roar of water like a siren's call. "That's my guardian angel," she said, loud enough for the cluster of reporters and onlookers to turn. "That's the man who saved me." Derek froze, his gloved hand midway to lighting a cigarette. The words hit him like a kick to the gut, twisting something raw inside. Guardian angel? Him? The guy who'd spent half his life running from shadows, patching up the Iron Promise crew after bar fights and border runs, but never sticking around for the dawn. He hadn't seen that face since. He squinted through the sheets of rain, and there it was, the faint scar on her cheek, a silvery line from where debris had grazed her in the flood. Naomi, the girl from the underpass. His cigarette fell sizzling into a puddle. The crowd murmured, phones lifting like vultures scenting blood. But Derek's world narrowed to her eyes, mirrors of a promise he'd buried deep. It had been a night of biblical fury, the kind that swallowed towns whole. Thunder cracked the sky open over the outskirts of Milford, a forgotten stretch where highways dipped into concrete veins beneath the earth. Derek was riding solo that evening. The Iron Promise patch on his back, a silent vow to brothers, scattered across state lines. He'd promised Jax, his old war buddy and club founder, he'd scout the back roads for a rumored smuggling route. Nothing noble, just survival in a world that chewed up men like them. But as he throttled down the rain-slicked ramp, his headlight caught a glint. A battered sedan, half submerged in the torrent, its taillights flickering like dying embers. He killed the engine, boots splashing into ankle-deep water that smelled of oil and decay. Voices, faint, desperate, echoed from the shadows. A woman, mid-30s, her face pale as moonlight, was wrestling with the back door. Inside, strapped in a car seat, a toddler wailed, water lapping at her tiny legs. "Help!" The mother gasped, her hands slipping on the lock. "The current, it's pulling her under." Derek didn't think. He waded in, the chill biting through his jeans like knives. The underpass was a black maw, debris swirling like vengeful spirits, branches, trash, shards of who knew what. He shouldered the door open with a grunt, the metal groaning in protest, and reached for the child. Naomi, even then barely 5, went limp in his arms, her cries muffled against his chest. He hoisted her free, passing her to the mother who clung to the hood like a lifeline. But the water rose fast, a muddy beast claiming its due. The sedan lurched and the woman slipped, her scream lost in the roar. Derek lunged, grabbing her wrist, hauling her onto solid ground just as the car vanished into the depths with a final, gurgling sigh. They collapsed on the embankment, gasping, the rain washing grit from their faces. "You saved us," the woman whispered, clutching Naomi close. Her name was Eleanor Wells, A single mom fleeing some nightmare in the city. Abusive ex, bad debts, the usual chains that bound folks like her. I can't thank you enough. But there's more. He did this. My ex, he runs with those crooked cops downtown, flooded the roads on purpose to trap me, make it look like an accident, if it comes to trial. Will you testify? Promise me you'll stand up if they drag me in. Derek's jaw tightened. Testify? Against badges with iron fists and deeper pockets? He'd seen enough corruption to know promises like that were fool's gold. But her eyes, haunted, pleading, mirrored the ones he'd failed back in his army days, brothers left in desert sands. Yeah, he rumbled, voice like gravel under tires. I promise. For her. He nodded at Naomi, who stared up at him with wonder, her small hand brushing his beard. In that moment, under the storm's fury, he felt the weight of it settle, a vow etched in water and shadow. The trial came months later, a farce in a stuffy courtroom reeking of polished wood and lies. Elena took the stand, her voice steady as she laid out the sabotage, the tampered barriers, the calls from her ex's cop cronies warning her to stay silent. Derek waited in the wings, Iron Promise brothers murmuring support from the back rows, their leathers a quiet armor against the suits. But pressure mounted like a gathering storm. Witnesses recanted, evidence vanished, and the judge, a silver-haired fox with ties to the precinct, banged his gavel on technicalities. Elena's ex walked free, smirking from the defense table. Derek's turn never came. "It's over," Jax had said later, clapping his shoulder at the clubhouse. "You did your part. Some fights ain't worth the grave." So Derek vanished, rode out with the dawn, leaving Milford's ghosts behind, joined the crew on longer hauls, burying the promise under miles of blacktop. Until now. Back in the rain, Naomi's aunt rushed forward, scooping her up with apologies tumbling like loose gravel. "She gets these ideas. Sorry, miss," she wanders. But the girl twisted in her arms, pointing again. "It's him, Aunt Lila, the angel from the water." Cameras flashed. Reporters closing in like wolves. Derek's heart thundered, louder than the downpour. He could run, twist the throttle, and melt into the highway's embrace. But those eyes held him, a tether across the years. The wound reopened, fresh and bleeding. Duty, honor, the iron promise he'd all but forgotten. As the crowd pressed closer, a familiar rumble cut through the chaos. Harleys, a convoy of 5, rolling up from the side street. Jax at the lead, his grizzled face splitting into a knowing grin under the helmet. "Cole," he called over the engine's growl. "Looks like the past caught up. You riding this one out alone?" Derek met Naomi's gaze one last time, the rain tracing paths down his weathered cheeks. No, he thought, not alone. The promise stirred, alive and demanding. And in that soaked instant, the biker who broke down knew. Redemption wasn't a distant horizon. It was right here, waiting to be claimed. The rumble of the Harleys swelled like a gathering thunder, their chrome accents slicing through the rain's relentless veil. Jax killed his engine first, the silence abrupt and heavy. Boots thudding onto the wet pavement as the crew dismounted in a loose semicircle. Rain traced rivulets down their vests, the Iron Promise emblem, a coiled serpent around a rusted shield, glistening like a badge of forgotten oaths. Derek straightened, wiping water from his eyes, the weight of Naomi's gaze still burning into him, even as her aunt hurried her away into the courthouse shadows. The girl's words echoed in his skull. Guardian Angel, a title that fit about as well as a halo on a devil. Jax approached, his stride unhurried, the lines on his face deepened by years of sun and secrets. At 52, he was the anchor of the club, the one who'd pulled Derek from the wreckage of their army days in the Gulf, forging the promise from the ashes of lost brothers. "Cole," he said, voice low and gravel thick, clapping a hand on Derek's shoulder. The touch grounded him, a reminder of the family stitched together by ink and blood, not birthrights. Didn't expect to find you playing statue in this mess. That kid, Naomi, right? Saw the news clips back then. You gonna tell me this is coincidence? The other riders hung back, eyes sharp under hooded brows. Rico with his scarred knuckles, Lena the only woman in the core crew, her ponytail slicked like a whip. They formed a wall against the prying lenses, the reporters' questions bouncing off like rain on leather. Derek glanced at the courthouse doors, where Naomi's small figure had vanished, but the pull remained, a hook in his chest. "Not coincidence," he muttered, the words tasting like old rust. She remembered, after all this time. He flexed his hands, calluses rough against the gloves, remembering the child's weight in his arms that night. Her trust a fragile thing he'd nearly shattered by walking away. Jax nodded, no surprise in his eyes. He'd always seen through Derek's silences, the way guilt coiled tighter than any chain. "Mount up, brother." "Clubhouse, we talk this out before the storm hits harder." The crew revved to life, engines snarling in unison, a symphony of defiance that scattered the crowd like leaves. Derek swung onto his bike, the familiar vibration humming through his bones, chasing away the chill. They rode out in formation, tires hissing on slick roads, the town blurring into a smear of neon and sodium lights. Milford's edges gave way to open country, where skeletal trees clawed at the sky and the rain eased to a misty veil. The Iron Promise clubhouse squatted on the outskirts like a weathered sentinel, a converted barn with corrugated walls patched by time and temper. Smoke curled from the chimney, carrying the faint tang of burning oak and motor oil. Inside, the air was thick with warmth. The long oak table scarred from countless maps and melees. Jax poured black coffee into mismatched mugs, the steam rising like ghosts as the crew settled. Lena leaned against the bar, arms crossed, her medic's kit always within reach, a habit from her ER days. Rico cracked his knuckles, the sound sharp as breaking ice. Derek stared into his mug, the surface rippling with his unsteady breath. "I promised her mother," he said finally, voice cutting the quiet. "Eleanor Wells, that night in the underpass. It wasn't just the flood. Her ex, Victor Kane. He's tangled with the badgers, the ones who look the other way for a cut. Sabotaged the barriers to make it seem like fate. She begged me to testify if it came to that. I said yes, for the kid." The words hung heavy, the memory flooding back. Elena's desperate grip on the embankment, Naomi's tiny hand in his, the sedan's final plunge into the dark. He'd kept his word in spirit, showing up to the trial, but the system had swallowed it whole. Witnesses silenced, files buried under red tape and threats. Jack sipped his coffee, eyes narrowing. "And when it all crumbled, you rode out." "We all did." Thought that chapter closed. There was no judgment, just the steady rhythm of a man who'd carried his own burdens. The club had rallied then too, scouts digging for dirt on Kane's crew, but the walls were too high, the risks too steep for men like them, forever eyed as outlaws. Derek's fist tightened around the mug, ceramic creaking. "It ain't closed. That girl." She looked at me like I was the only light in her storm. And now, Kane's still out there, pulling strings. I hear whispers he's circling back, pressuring Elena to drop any appeals. If I vanish again, what does that make me? Just another shadow. Lena stepped forward, her voice soft but edged like a blade. "Makes you human, Cole. But the promise? That's what keeps us from breaking." She'd lost her own brother to a corrupt cop's bullet years back, the fire that forged her into the crew's quiet steel. "We dig, quiet-like. No guns, no glory, just truth." Rico grunted agreement, pulling a worn laptop from under the bar. "Got contacts in the shadows, old informants, folks who owe us. Kane's got a weak spot, that precinct sergeant, Harlan. Word is he's skimming protection money. If we link it to the flood job." The plan unfolded like a map on the table, lines drawn in marker and memory, not vengeance, but justice, the kind that exposed rot without feeding the beast. Derek felt the old fire stir, not rage, but resolve, the promise uncoiling from its grave. Outside, the rain had stopped, moonlight filtering through the clouds, casting silver on the bikes lined like faithful hounds. But as they talked into the night, a distant siren wailed, a reminder that eyes were always watching. By dawn, the crew was moving, Rico on a recon ride, Lena reaching out to Elena through back channels. Derek lingered by the window, the horizon a promise of roads ahead. The wound from yesterday ached, but it was alive now, pulsing with purpose. He'd broken once, letting the system win. Not this time. For Naomi, for Elena, for the man he'd sworn to be under that storm-tossed sky. The iron promise wasn't just leather and engines. It was the vow that bound them, unbreakable as the dawn. And now I invite you to leave in the comments where you're watching from and the exact hour you heard this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel and at what moments they reach you. The first light of dawn crept over the horizon like a hesitant thief, painting the clubhouse windows in pale gold. Derek stood by the scarred oak table, his fingers tracing the faint outline of a route sketched in marker, backroads snaking toward the precinct's underbelly. The air inside hummed with the residue of last night's talk, coffee grounds scattered like spent shells, the low murmur of Rico's laptop fan whirring in the corner. Sleep had been a fleeting visitor, chased away by the ghosts of what-ifs. Naomi's face, small and fierce in the rain, replayed in his mind, her finger jabbing the air like an accusation he couldn't dodge. Jax emerged from the back room, his boots scuffing the worn floorboards, carrying a thermos of fresh brew that smelled of earth and resolve. "Rico's already wheels up," he said, pouring a stream into Derek's mug. The steam curled upward, carrying the weight of unspoken plans. Headed to that dive bar on the edge of town, place where Harlan's crew unwinds. Quiet ears, no badges. Lena's on the line with Elena now, seeing if she'll talk without spooking. Jax's eyes, sharp as flint, met Derek's. "You holding? This ain't just your promise anymore. It's ours." Derek nodded, the motion tight, his jaw shadowed by stubble that caught the light like frost on iron. Holding, barely. The iron promise had always been his anchor, a patchwork family forged in the fires of war and wanderlust. Jax, with his steady hand, Lena, the healer who'd stitched more than wounds, Rico, the shadow who slipped through cracks others couldn't see. They'd pulled him from the edge after the Gulf, when sand and screams had carved hollows too deep for words. But this, stepping back into the light, facing the machine that ground down folks like Elena, felt like tempting fate on a rain-slick curve. A sharp ring cut the quiet, Lena's phone vibrating against the bar like an impatient heartbeat. She snatched it up, her ponytail swinging as she paced to the window, voice dropping to a murmur. Derek caught fragments. "Elena, it's Lena from the club." "Yeah, Cole's here, safe." The conversation stretched, Lena's brow furrowing like gathering clouds. When she hung up, the room stilled, all eyes on her. She's scared, but listening. Kane's been around. Subtle threats, notes on her door, whispers at Naomi's school. Says the aunt's pulling back, afraid for the kid. But Elena... "She remembers you, Cole. Said your promise kept her going through the dark days after the trial." The words landed soft, but they stirred the embers in Derek's chest. Elena, alive and fighting, her voice a thread pulling him forward. He could picture her now, in some cramped apartment that smelled of instant noodles and worry, Naomi's drawings taped to the fridge like talismans. "What does she need?" he asked, voice rough as the gravel outside. Lena leaned on the table, her medic's hand steady. "Testimony that sticks this time, not just yours, others. Folks who saw the sabotage, heard the bribes. But it's risky. Harlan's got the town sewn up. One wrong word, and Liv's unravel. Her gaze softened, a flicker of her own loss crossing her features. The brother gone too soon. Justice twisted into knots by men in uniform. We build it slow, moral ground, no shortcuts. That's the promise. Outside, the door creaked open, letting in a gust of cool morning air laced with pine and dew. Rico slipped back in, his jacket dusted with road grit, face set like carved stone. He dropped a crumpled napkin on the table, notes scrawled in hasty ink, names, times. A bar tab linking Harlan to Kane's operations. Overheard enough, Rico said, sliding into a chair with a grunt. Harlan's bragging about that flood job. Called it cleaning house. Bragged to a bartender who owes me a favor. But he's twitchy. Knows eyes are turning. Kane's pushing for a meet tonight, some warehouse on the river, if we tail it quiet. Jax's fist came down, not hard, but firm, a punctuation to the idea. No tails, not yet. We gather leverage first. Recordings, witnesses who'll speak if protected. Cole, you reach out to that old contact from the trial days? The mechanic who fixed Elena's car before it went under? Derek's mind raced back, the memory surfacing like a buoy in fog. Tommy Ruiz, a grease monkey with nimble fingers, and a grudge against the badgers who'd roughed him up once. He'd mentioned loose bolts on the barriers, signs of tampering. Yeah, Liv's out by the tracks now. I'll ride over. The decision settled over him, heavy but right, the promise flexing like a muscle long dormant. As the crew dispersed, Jax coordinating safe houses, Lena prepping encrypted lines, Derek fired up his Harley, the engine's roar a balm against the dawn's chill. The road unfolded before him, mist rising from the fields like exhaled breaths, the world waking in hushed tones. Milford's outskirts blurred past, rusted silos standing sentinel, a lone deer bounding into the underbrush. Tommy's garage squatted at the end of a dirt lane, its bays open to the sky, tools glinting like scattered stars. Tommy looked up from under a truck's hood, wiping oil from his hands on a rag that had seen better days. At 40, he was wiry, eyes wary but warming when they landed on Derek. Cole? Been years. Heard you ghosts rode out after the mess. They talked in the shadow of the lift, voices low, the scent of hydraulic fluid mingling with the earth's fresh dampness. Tommy confirmed it. The barriers had been weakened, deliberate cuts hidden under rust. Saw Kane's boys there days before the storm. Harlan turned blind. I kept quiet then, family to think of. But now, for that woman and kid, yeah, I'll sign whatever. Just keep it clean. Relief washed through Derek. Cool as the river nearby, but laced with tension. This was leverage, a crack in the facade, but Harlan's web was vast. As he rode back, the sun climbing higher, casting long shadows that danced like doubts, his phone buzzed. Lena. Elena's meeting us at a neutral spot. Noon, bring what you've got. The clubhouse buzzed anew when he returned. The table now, a war room of scribbled notes and flickering screens. Jax mapped the warehouse meet, Rico cross-checking alibis. But beneath the strategy hummed the deeper current. Not conquest, but reclamation. Derek felt it in his bones, the promise he'd made under that flooding sky, no longer a chain, but a compass. Naomi's words echoed, guardian angel, a mantle he wasn't sure he deserved, but one he'd wear all the same. By midday they rolled out in pairs, bikes humming low to avoid drawing eyes. The neutral spot was a roadside diner on the county line, its neon sign flickering like a weary heartbeat. Elena waited in a booth, Naomi beside her, the girl's eyes lighting up as Derek entered. No rain this time, just the clink of silverware and the sizzle of bacon, but the air crackled with unspoken stakes. "You came back," Elena said, voice steady, her hand covering Naomi's. The child smiled, small and trusting, and in that moment, Derek knew the wound was healing. Not with fanfare, but with the quiet strength of vows renewed. As they shared stories, piecing truths like a mosaic, a shadow passed the window. A cruiser, slow and deliberate. Harlan's reach, testing the edges. The crew tensed but held, their loyalty a shield forged in silence. The fight was just beginning, but for the first time in years Derek rode toward the light, the iron promise at his back, unbreakable as the road itself. The diner's fluorescent lights hummed overhead like distant cicadas, casting a warm, yellowish glow over the checkered linoleum and the steam rising from platters of hash browns. Derek slid into the booth opposite Elena and Naomi, the vinyl seat creaking under his weight, the scent of greasy bacon and fresh coffee wrapping around him like an old coat. The crew had fanned out, Jax nursing a black brew at the counter, Lena and Rico claiming a corner table with menus as shields, their eyes flicking to the windows where the cruiser's taillights had faded into the midday haze. Outside, the county line stretched flat and unyielding, fields of golden wheat swaying under a sky scrubbed clean by the night's storm. Elena's face, lined with the quiet wear of survival, softened as she met Derek's gaze. Her hands, calloused from long shifts at the mill, rested protectively on Naomi's shoulder. The girl, all wide eyes and tangled curls, clutched a crayon sketch of a motorcycle under thunderclouds, her small fingers tracing the lines as if to summon the memory. "You look just like I drew you," Naomi whispered, sliding the paper across the table. Derek took it, the wax smudging slightly under his thumb, a crude angel on a bike with wings of flame. His throat tightened, the image piercing deeper than any blade. "I never forgot," Elena said, her voice a steady thread in the diner's murmur of clinking forks and muffled conversations. "That night, the water was everywhere, pulling like it had a grudge. You didn't hesitate, carried her out, then me, and the promise, God, Cole. It was the only thing that kept me from breaking when the trial turned to ash." She glanced at Naomi, who beamed up at her, oblivious to the shadows in her mother's eyes. "Kane's been circling since. Notes in the mailbox, calls at odd hours. Says he'll make sure Naomi never sees another birthday if I push. The aunt's scared stiff, won't even let the girl play outside alone." Derek leaned forward, elbows on the scarred Formica, the salt shaker between them like a sentinel. The air carried the faint tang of pie crust from the kitchen, but it did little to sweeten the bitterness rising in him. Harlan's cruiser had been no accident, a probe testing the waters they'd just stirred. "We gotta start," he said, keeping his tone low, gravel rough. "Tommy Ruiz, remember him? The mechanic. He's in. Saw the tampering on those barriers himself. Loose bolts, cuts that weren't from rust, links it straight to Kane's crew." He slid a folded note across, Tommy's signature scrawled at the bottom, words that could crack the facade if they held. Elena's fingers trembled as she unfolded it, hope flickering in her eyes like a match in wind. This could change everything, but Harlan, he's got the judge in his pocket, the DA too. Last time they buried it all. If we go loud now without more. She trailed off, glancing at the window where a semi rumbled past, its air brakes sighing like a weary confession. Jax ambled over then, his presence a solid wall against the room's chatter, sliding into the booth's edge. "Not loud," he rumbled, voice pitched for their ears alone. "Smart. Rico's got ears in that warehouse tonight. Kane and Harlan sealing some deal on riverfront skims. We don't crash. We listen. Get voices on tape, clean and clear. Pair it with Tommy's statement, Elena's story. Build a file that no gavel can bang away." His eyes, weathered by decades of hard choices, held Derek's. The iron promise wasn't about glory. It was the quiet stand. The loyalty that outlasted storms. Jax had taught him that in the sands overseas, when promises meant life or the grave. Naomi shifted, her small hand finding Derek's across the table, warm and trusting. "Are you going to make the bad men go away, Angel?" The question hung, innocent as morning dew, but it sliced through the tension like sunlight through blinds. Derek's chest ached, The old wound from the trial reopening, not with pain, but purpose. He'd run once, convinced the system's gears would grind him to dust, but here, in this greasy spoon with the hum of life around them, he saw the cost of silence. Eyes like Naomi's dimmed by fear, mothers like Elena bowed under invisible chains. "We'll try, kid," he murmured, squeezing her hand gently, the crayon paper crinkling between them. "For keeps this time." The words felt like a vow, renewed, etched deeper than ink on leather. Lena joined them quietly, her medic's bag slung over one shoulder, slipping Elena a burner phone wrapped in a napkin. "For safe calls," she said softly. "And if things heat up, we got a safe house by the old mill. No questions." The plans solidified over cooling coffee, threads weaving into a net. Rico's recon at dusk, Jax lining up a neutral drop for the recordings, Derek shadowing Elena back to her place to check for tails. No heroics, just the steady work of truth against corruption, a moral siege, not a blaze. As they rose to leave, the diner door jingled, admitting a gust of warm air, thick with the scent of sun-baked earth. Naomi hugged Derek's leg, her whisper fierce. "Don't disappear again." He nodded, the promise swelling in his ribs, unbreakable now. They mounted up outside, engines purring low to blend with the highway's drone. The cruiser was gone, but its shadow lingered, a reminder of the eyes in the dark. Derek rode point, wind whipping his jacket, the road ahead curving like a question mark. Kane's warehouse loomed in his mind, a concrete beast by the river's muddy banks, where deals were struck in whispers and lies. Tonight, the iron promise would slip close, not as wolves, but guardians, silent, steadfast. By evening, the crew gathered at the clubhouse's edge, bikes tucked in the tree line overlooking the water. The river murmured below, dark and restless, carrying the faint rot of silt and secrets. Rico crouched by a van borrowed from a sympathetic mechanic, wires snaking to a recorder that blinked like a watchful eye. "Position set," he whispered into a comms earpiece, voice crackling softly. Harlan's truck just pulled in, Kane's silver ride behind. Guards at the doors, but the vents are clear. Derek peered through binoculars from a ridge, the warehouse's lights spilling yellow pools onto the gravel lot. Figures moved inside, shadows bargaining, voices muffled but rising on the humid air. His pulse thrummed, steady as the engine's idle, the weight of Naomi's drawing tucked in his vest like a talisman. This wasn't revenge. It was redemption's edge, the moment where promises met the grindstone. Then a voice cut through the static, Harlan's, oily and smug. "The flood was clean, Victor. No loose ends but that bitch and her kid. You handle the pressure, I bury the rest." Kane's laugh followed, sharp as shattered glass. The recorder hummed, capturing it all, truth uncoiling like smoke. But as Rico signaled the pullback, headlights swept the ridge, a patrol, too close, too soon. Engines revved in the distance, closing fast. Derek's hand went to his throttle, heart pounding. The net was tightening, but so was the noose. They had the leverage now, fragile as dawn light. But it burned bright. For the girl who called him angel, for the mother who believed he'd ride through the fire. If this story touched your heart, hit that like button below. It helps spread these tales of quiet courage far and wide. The headlights pierced the tree line like accusatory fingers, sweeping the ridge in erratic arcs that turned night into a fractured mosaic of light and shadow. Derek's breath caught, sharp and metallic in his throat, as the patrol's siren wailed to life, a banshee cry echoing off the river's glassy surface. Gravel crunched under the van's tires as Rico gunned it backward. The recorder clutched in his lap like a stolen relic. "Go! Go!" Jax barked into the comms, his voice a low thunder over the static. The crew scattered, engines roaring to life in a staggered chorus, bikes leaping from the underbrush like awakened beasts. Derek twisted the throttle, his Harley surging forward down the embankment, mud spraying in rooster tails that stung his face. The wind clawed at his jacket, carrying the river's briny tang mixed with the acrid bite of exhaust. Behind him, the patrol's beams bounced closer, tires howling on the access road that paralleled the water. Heart slamming against his ribs, he glanced in the side mirror, Lena and Rico's van weaving through the pines, Jax's tail light a red beacon in the gloom. No time for finesse. This was survival's raw edge, the kind that tested vows in the crucible of flight. They hit the county road at a screaming clip, the asphalt slick from evening dew, blurring into a black ribbon under the moon's pale scrutiny. Derek led the peel-out, veering east toward the old logging trails that spiderwebbed the hills, paths the Badgers wouldn't chase blindly, not without backup that could turn a quiet recon into a full-blown siege. The siren faded, then surged again, a persistent ghost nipping at their heels. "Ditch the main drag," Jax growled over the wind-whipped earpiece. "Split at the fork. Rico, you and Lena loop south to the safe house. Cole and I draw 'em off." The fork came fast, a Y in the road shrouded by overhanging branches that whipped like lashes. Derek signaled with a gloved fist, peeling right into the narrower trail, Jax tight on his flank. The van's lights vanished leftward, swallowed by the night. Alone now, the pursuit felt intimate, the cruiser's growl vibrating through the ground like a predator's rumble. Derek's mind raced ahead of the bike, the recording, Harlan's damning words captured in digital ink, admissions of sabotage, the flood as a weapon. It was gold, pure leverage, but fragile as a spider's thread if they lost it here. The trail twisted upward, roots and ruts jolting through the suspension, the scent of damp earth and pine resin thick in his nostrils. Jax pulled alongside, his face a mask of grim focus under the helmet's visor. "You good?" he shouted, the words torn by the rush. Derek nodded, jaw set, but inside, the old doubts clawed. Was this the promise fulfilled, or just dragging his brothers into the abyss? The iron promise had weathered bar storms and border dust-ups, but corruption like Harlan's was a hydra. Cut one head, two grew back, poisoned with power. The cruiser faltered at the trail's mouth, its bulk unsuited for the wilds, but radio chatter crackled faintly, calling for units, painting their plates. Derek pushed harder, the engine's bellow drowning his thoughts, until the path spat them onto a fire road overlooking the valley. Milford twinkled below, a scatter of lights like fallen stars, the river a silver vein pulsing through it all. They killed the lights, coasting into a thicket where the bikes could hide like slumbering wolves. The patrol thundered past on the distant highway, oblivious, its wail dopplering into silence. Panting, Derek dismounted, leaning against a tree trunk, rough as old leather. Jax joined him, pulling off his helmet to reveal sweat-slicked hair and eyes that gleamed with the fire of narrow escapes. "Close," Jax said, clapping Derek's back. "But we got it. Rico's signal, files secure." He pulled a battered satellite phone from his vest, the screen glowing faintly. A text from Lena. "Safe. Heading to drop." Elena's waiting for word. Relief washed over Derek, cool as the night's breath, but it carried undercurrents of unease. The warehouse tape was a weapon. Harlan's voice tying the flood to Kane's malice, but it needed teeth. More voices, ironclad chains to bind the lies. He thought of Naomi's drawing, tucked safe in his pocket, her angel on flames, a reminder that this wasn't for glory, but for the quiet mending of broken trust. "We can't stop here," he said, voice steady despite the adrenaline's echo. "Elena's counting on us. Tommy's statement. The tape. It's a start, but Kane'll smell it. We need to shield her, get Naomi clear if it heats up." Jax nodded, the lines around his mouth deepening like furrows in clay. Family first, always. That was the promise's core, etched in their patches. Not blood, but bonds forged in fire. The chosen kin that stood when the world turned cold. Jax had lost his own sister to a system that looked away. Much like Elena's fight, it was why he'd rallied the crew without hesitation, pulling strings from old war contacts to safe harbors. Rico's decoding the audio now. Clean it up, anonymize the source. Then we reach out to that reporter from the trial, the one who sniffed around but got shut down. She's got a nose for rot, might run the story if we feed her proof. They rode back under cover of darkness, the fire road giving way to back lanes that skirted the town's watchful eyes. The clubhouse loomed welcoming, its windows aglow like embers in a hearth, the air inside thick with the aroma of reheated stew and machine oil. Lena and Rico were already there, the van parked discreetly in the rear. Rico hunched over the laptop at the table, headphones clamped on, his scarred fingers dancing across keys. "Got it," he announced as they entered, pulling the buds free. The room fell quiet, all eyes on the speaker he rigged, a tinny box that crackled to life. Harlan's voice filled the space, smug and unfiltered. "The flood was clean, Victor. No loose ends but that bitch and her kid." Kane's response slithered in, laced with menace. The crew listened in stony silence, the words hanging like smoke after a gunshot. Elena's face would light with this, Derek knew, a beacon in her storm. But the risks loomed larger. Retaliation swift as a blade, Kane's reach into schools and streets, Harlan's badge a shield for the guilty. Lena broke the hush, her voice measured as she bandaged a shallow scrape on Rico's arm from the escape. "We move careful. Copy the file to multiples, clouds, drives, even old-school tapes. Send Elena a duplicate tonight. Let her lawyer build from it." Her eyes met Derek's, a shared understanding passing between them. Healers mending more than flesh, stitching justice from frayed threads. As midnight deepened, the plan took shape anew. Jax contacting the reporter under a ghost alias, Rico scouting escape routes for Elena and Naomi, Derek volunteering for the watch on their apartment. Sleep tugged at the edges, but resolve burned brighter. The promise Derek had made in the underpass's fury, now a shared flame. Outside, the river whispered on, carrying secrets downstream, while the moon hung high, witness to men who chose light over shadow. Dawn's first blush found Derek on the road again, the apartment complex a squat hive of faded brick and chain-link dreams. He parked a block away, engine off, blending into the morning fog that rolled in from the water. Elena's unit was second floor, curtains drawn tight, but a faint movement stirred, Naomi's silhouette waving a hand as if sensing him. The girl's trust pierced him, a quiet call to arms, but as he settled in, a familiar silver car idled at the curb below, Kane's, engine purring like a threat unspoken. The noose tightened, moral lines blurring in the gathering light. Derek's hand hovered over the key, the iron promises raw ready, but he held, watching, waiting, the Guardian's vigil unbroken. Redemption demanded patience, the slow grind of honor against the machine, and for the first time he felt its weight not as burden, but as wings. The fog clung to the apartment complex like a shroud, muting the morning's tentative light into a diffused haze that softened the edges of chain-link fences and sagging porches. Derek hunched low over his handlebars, the Harley's frame a cold anchor against the damp chill seeping through his gloves. The silver car idled below Elena's window, its engine a low, predatory hum that blended with the distant rumble of a waking town. Trash trucks groaning, early commuters coughing to life. Kane's silhouette was unmistakable in the driver's seat, broad shoulders tense, a cigarette's glow punctuating the mist like a warning flare. Derek's pulse matched the tick of his watch, steady but laced with the old army rhythm. Observe, assess, endure. He'd been there an hour, the dew collecting on his beard in tiny beads that traced paths down his neck. The burner phone in his pocket vibrated once. Jax, checking in. "Eyes on?" the text read, simple as a battlefield ping. Derek thumbed a reply. "Silver snake at the door, holding." No more, words were ammunition, saved for when they counted. Inside, through the gauzy curtain gap, Naomi's shadow danced briefly, a small hand pressing against the glass, as if the girl could sense the Guardian beyond. Eleanor's voice murmured low, pulling her back, the mother's instinct a quiet fortress against the encroaching shadow. Kane didn't move, just sat there, the smoke curling from his window like exhaled threats. Derek knew the type, all bluster wrapped in calculated menace, the kind who'd sabotage a flood to erase loose ends, then play the grieving ex in court. The trial's ghost stirred, Elena's testimony crumbling under Harlan's glare, the judge's gavel a final seal on injustice. But now, with the warehouse tape burning a hole in Rico's secure drive, the scales tipped. Not vengeance, but balance, the moral weight of truth pressing against corruption's greased wheels. A door creaked below, and Derek tensed, his hand drifting to the key. Elena emerged, Naomi bundled in her arms, a duffel slung over one shoulder. The girl's eyes scanned the lot, lighting on the silver car with a flinch that twisted Derek's gut. Kane stepped out then, slow and deliberate, his voice carrying up like oil on water. "Elena, we need to talk, for the kid's sake." No raised tones, just that oily persuasion, the kind that hid fists in velvet. She froze at the foot of the stairs, Naomi burying her face in her neck, small fingers clutching fabric. "We're done talking, Victor. The law's done with you. I'm done too." Her words were steel, forged in the underpass's memory, but the tremor beneath betrayed the fear. Kane advanced a step, his shadow stretching long in the fog, but Derek was already moving. The Harley coughed to life with a muffled roar, rolling forward silent as a spectre until he was close enough to feel the heat from Kane's tailpipe. "Back off!" Derek growled, killing the engine with a final sputter, boots hitting pavement like punctuation. He swung off, broad frame blocking the path, the iron promise patch a silent emblem on his back. Kane's eyes narrowed, flicking over him, recognition dawning slow, laced with disdain. "You, the biker ghost from the flood, thought you'd ridden off for good." His laugh was bark without mirth, but his stance shifted, wary now, the predator sensing a larger pack. Eleanor clutched Naomi tighter, edging toward Derek's side. "Cole," she breathed, relief threading her voice like sunlight through clouds. The girl peeked out, her face brightening. "Angel!" The word cut the tension, innocent and piercing, reminding them all of stakes beyond the standoff. Kane's jaw tightened, but he held his ground, hands loose at his sides. "This ain't your fight, stranger. Family business." The lie hung there, rotten as river silt, but Derek met his gaze, unblinking, the promise from that stormy night uncoiling in his chest. "Family? You tried to drown yours." "I saw it, heard it too. Your chat with Harlan last night. Flood wasn't fate, it was you." He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. The words landed like lead weights, Kane's face paling under the stubble. A bluff wrapped in truth. The tape's existence a shadow he couldn't disprove yet. Kane's eyes darted to the apartments, calculating escapes, but the fog muffled any call for backup. Lies. "You'd drag us all down for what? Some dead-end vow?" But doubt cracked his facade, the corruption's armor showing rust. Elena stepped forward, voice steady. "It's over, Victor. We have proof. Testimonies. Your game's up." Naomi nodded against her, small but fierce, the family's chosen strength shining through. Derek felt it then, the iron promises echo, not just his burden, but theirs. A web of loyalty spanning the crew's quiet labors, Rico's recordings, Tommy's affidavit, Lena's safe passages. Kane lunged then, not with fists, but a grab for Eleanor's arm, desperation stripping the polish. Derek moved like water, intercepting with a forearm block that sent the man stumbling back into his car door. No blows landed, just the firm barrier of resolve, the moral line held without crossing into chaos. "Walk away," Derek said, low and final, "or the tape goes wide tomorrow. Every word, every scheme." Sirens wailed faint in the distance, perhaps a neighbor's call or Harlan's web twitching. Kane straightened, venom in his glare, but he slid back into the driver's seat, engine snarling to life. The silver car peeled out, tires spitting gravel, vanishing into the fog like a bad dream retreating. Elena sagged against Derek, Naomi between them, the trio a fragile unit forged anew. They didn't linger. Derek loaded them onto a spare bike from the club's shadow fleet, a softer ride for the road ahead, while his phone buzzed with Jax's update. Harlan's squirming, reporters biting, Safehouse prepped. The ride out was hushed, the fog lifting to reveal rolling hills bathed in gold, the river shrinking to a silver thread below. At the old mill, hidden among whispering willows, Lena waited with hot tea and blankets, the air scented with chamomile and aged timber. Inside, by a fire that crackled like whispered secrets, Elena unpacked the duffel, Naomi sketching anew, angels and bikes under clear skies. "You kept your word," Elena said, handing Derek a faded photo from the flood night, him, sodden and stern, cradling the girl. "After everything, you came back." Derek took it, the image blurring slightly in the firelight, his scars a map of losses redeemed. The wound from the trial, once a gaping chasm, now scarred over with purpose. The iron promises quiet power, turning solitary vows into unbreakable chains. But as night fell, Rico's voice crackled over the line. "Harlan's mobilizing. Warrants incoming, but they're fishing. We push the story now, or they bury us first." The choice loomed, ethical edges sharp. Expose the rot and risk the blaze, or fade back into shadows. Derek looked to Naomi, asleep with her drawing clutched tight, and knew redemption wasn't a solo ride, it was the crew's collective stand, honor's legacy etched in the dawn. The noose might tighten, but they'd slip it together, guardians in the gathering storm. The fire's embers glowed like captured stars in the old mill's hearth, casting flickering shadows across the rough-hewn walls where dust motes danced in the draught. Derek sat on a worn crate, the photo Elena had given him still clutched in his hand, its edges curling from the humidity of the safe house. Naomi slept, curled on a pallet nearby, her chest rising and falling in the rhythm of untroubled dreams, the crayon drawing peeking from beneath her blanket, a testament to innocence reclaimed. The air carried the faint, comforting scent of chamomile tea and aged wood, a fragile sanctuary against the storm brewing beyond the willows. Jax paced the creaking floorboards, his phone pressed to his ear, voice a controlled rumble. "Yeah, it's solid. Harlan's own words, time-stamped. Send it to the feds if the locals balk. Anonymous drop, no traces back to us." He hung up, turning to the group clustered around the scarred table. Lena stirring a pot of soup, Rico nursing a mug of black coffee, his laptop screen a blue glow illuminating the lines of fatigue on his face. Elena stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself, the duffel strap still slung over her shoulder like a lifeline. "Reporters got it," Jack said, his words dropping like stones into still water. "The one from the trial, Marissa Hale. She's been digging on Harlan for months, off the books. Says the tape's the key, ties the flood sabotage to a string of accidents the precinct swept under. She's running the story at dawn, with Tommy's statement attached. Feds'll sniff it from there. No gavel can bury this one." Derek felt the weight lift, incremental but real, like shedding rusted armor after a long haul. The promise he'd made in the underpass's chaos, sodden vows exchanged amid the roar of water, had evolved from a solitary burden to this, a collective stand, the iron promise's unyielding core. He'd broken once, riding into the horizon to escape the system's grind, but the crew had pulled him back, their loyalty a chain stronger than any he'd feared. Jax, with his war-forged steadiness. Lena, mending souls as deftly as wounds. Rico, the shadow who unearthed truths in the dark. They weren't angels, but guardians all the same, chosen family stitched from scars and shared silences. Elena's eyes met his across the room, gratitude softening the edges of her exhaustion. "You didn't have to come back, Cole. After the trial, I thought that was it. But Naomi, she never forgot. called you her angel from the start. She knelt by the pallet, brushing a curl from the girl's forehead, the motion tender as a prayer. Naomi stirred, murmuring in her sleep, and Elena's voice cracked, just a fraction. Cain's threats, they kept us locked in fear. But this, proof like that, it ends the nightmare. The mill's door creaked then, admitting a gust of night air laced with river mist and the distant hum of traffic. No alarms, just the world turning, indifferent to the moral siege unfolding within. Rico glanced up from his screen, a faint smile cracking his stoic mask. Chatter's picking up already. Harlan's scrambling, calls to the judge, pulling strings, but Hale's got backups. The story's mirrored online, untouchable. Cain's holed up, silver car ditched at the docks. They're cornered, not us. Dawn crept in slowly, painting the sky in hues of rose and steel, the willows whispering secrets to the awakening breeze. The crew moved like a well-oiled machine, packing essentials into saddlebags, blankets for Naomi, Elena's documents, the burner phones as lifelines. Derek helped Elena to her feet, Naomi now awake and clinging to her mother's leg, eyes wide but trusting as they fell on him. "We go now?" the girl asked, her voice small against the fire's dying crackle. "Yeah, kid," Derek replied, crouching to her level, the photo slipping back into his vest pocket like a talisman, to a place where bad dreams can't follow. He lifted her onto the spare bike seat, her arms wrapping around his waist with the ease of old familiarity, while Elena mounted behind Jack's. The engines purred to life, a low symphony that blended with the river's murmur, carrying them out from the mill's embrace onto roads that wound toward open country. They rode in loose formation, the morning light gilding the chrome and leather, the scent of dew-kissed fields chasing away the night's tension. Milford receded in the mirrors, its spires and secrets shrinking to specks. By mid-morning, they crossed into neutral ground, a quiet town with a courthouse untainted by Harlan's shadow, where Eleanor's lawyer waited with federal contacts primed by Hale's exposé. The story broke wide as they arrived, headlines scrolling on gas station screens, Harlan's name linked to the flood's dark underbelly, Cain's empire unraveling in quiet arrests at dawn. No spectacle, just the inexorable tide of truth washing away the corruption without a drop of blood. In the lawyer's office, walls lined with books that smelled of justice long overdue, Elena signed the final papers, protective orders, custody affirmations, a new start funded by a quiet settlement from the club's old war payout reserves. Naomi played with a toy truck on the rug, her laughter a balm. While Derek stood sentinel by the door, the iron promise patch a badge of battles won silently. "It's done," the lawyer said, sliding copies across the desk. "The feds have the tape. Charges stick this time. No more shadows." Outside, under a sky vast and unyielding, the crew gathered one last time. Hugs exchanged, fierce for Elena, gentle for Naomi, who pressed a new drawing into Derek's hand. Angels on bikes, riding toward a sun-warmed horizon. "Thank you," Elena whispered, tears tracing clean paths down her cheeks, "for keeping the promise, for being the light we needed." Derek nodded, throat tight, the wound from years past now a healed scar, strong and unyielding. He'd been the tough man who broke down in the rain, guardian angel to a girl who'd seen through his armor. But redemption came not in applause, but in this, the quiet relief of honor reclaimed, the family chosen that rode beside him. Jax clapped his shoulder, the gesture saying what words couldn't. The promise endured, unbreakable as the road. As they mounted up for the final leg home, engines thrumming like heartbeats synced, Derek glanced back at Elena and Naomi waving from the courthouse steps. The silver thread of the river caught the light, flowing onward, carrying old burdens away. He'd fulfilled the vow from that flooded night, not alone, but with brothers and sisters bound by more than blood. In a world of cynics and chains, they'd chosen loyalty, justice's slow burn over vengeance's blaze. And in that choice, Derek found his peace, a legacy of silent courage, etched forever in the miles ahead. Thank you for joining us on this journey of promises kept and hearts mended. If these stories of quiet heroism resonate with you, please subscribe and turn on notifications. We'd love to have you ride along for more tales from the Iron Promise. Your support keeps the road open for all.